Hi, I'm Brandon from Honest Brothers, and today I'm going to show you how I made this hilariously unnecessary automatic drill press vise. So I originally uploaded a much longer version of this video to YouTube and then realized there's a lot of stuff in here that doesn't really need to be in here. So this is my second edit of this, so you can have those 10 minutes of your life back. You're welcome. So I started this project out by ripping these pieces of white oak down on the table saw and took them over to the miter saw and basically cut a bunch of pieces out to make a base for the drill press vise. And this is me assembling this base using pipe clamps and some regular clamps and some other clamps. And once I was done with that, I glued together the ends that will make up the jaw for the drill press vise, and then cut a piece out that will be the sliding piece on the drill press vise. And you see there that fits perfectly in the center, and that will be the piece that eventually goes through the nut for the lead screw. Once I was done, everything was dry, I came back, it's probably the next day, and sanded everything down on this stationary belt sander. Once everything was sanded down nice and smooth, at least on the ends, I could get to assembling the rest of the base of the vise. And this is me assembling the clamping portion that will actually act as the jaw that slides back and forth on the drill press vise. And I assembled it like this for a reason. That way I can make sure that I get this little piece here exactly in the middle. And it didn't have to be exact because I ended up truing everything up on the table saw later, but I wanted it to be pretty close. And once everything was dry, I came back to the belt sander again and sanded it all down. And this is what you call a lead screw with a lead screw nut. Lead screws are generally used in high torque applications like CNC machines. They're also used commonly on vices, like a vise that you would buy from the store. Once I was done with that, I needed to drill a hole through both the ends of the base and through the clamping jaw on the drill press vise. I got the hole drilled all the way through. Tried to use double-sided sticky tape, didn't really hold very well, so I ended up just putting the clamps on there as you saw a minute ago. And this is the nut that goes on the lead screw, and in order for me to recess this, I had to drill a couple recessed holes using a Forstner bit. You can see there, it fits pretty nice and even. Once that was finished, I moved over to the other side to drill the hole for the lead screw on the other side of the base, and then I could get to assembling. Now, the end of the lead screw here has what's called a pillow bearing on it, and I bought that as a kit which came with two pillow bearings, a T8 lead screw, which is a 8mm diameter lead screw, and a 8mm pitch, and it also came with the brass drive nut for this. Moving onward, I used this CA glue, it's basically super glue, woodworker's super glue, to glue down the brass drive nut for the lead screw. And I think the most fun that I had in this project was spinning that lead screw back and forth. So this is accelerant for the CA glue. It makes the CA glue set up faster, that way you can get to working on other things. Unlike, wood glue, usually it takes 24 hours to fully cure, and you have to leave everything clamped for at least 30 minutes, and if not longer. But finally, this was starting to come together. You can see that the lead screw stays stationary there, and I'm able to move it back and forth via hand. And I added in a couple cabinet screws that have built-in washers on the head of them to the drive piece, the jaws here. And in order for the motor to sit on this, I needed to add a little bit of clearance to the bottom. I didn't plan for this. probably should have made a CAD drawing of this, but I usually do for something this complicated, but I didn't for some reason on this one. And here's me once everything dried, truing the base up, and I went through and sanded everything out, made it all pretty, made it beautiful, ran it through the router table and put a 45-degree chamfer on the edges that I could see. I didn't put the chamfer on the clamping edges because I wanted the clamping edge to go all the way to the top. Now this is a coupler that will attach the motor to the lead screw, and in order for me to recess the coupler, I needed to go back to the drill press and use a Forstner bit to recess this. Now this is not a Forstner bit. This is normally it's a step bit. It's normally a metalworking bit, but I wanted to make sure that I could keep my holes centered, so I used a step bit first and then drilled through with the Forstner bit until, as you can see there, it sits nice and perfect. This is me marking where I want the switch to go. I went back over the drill press, drilled out some holes with some Forstner bits. That way I would have less to chisel away. Now you can actually use a hand chisel to chisel a square hole. It's just normally a little bit faster to drill most of the wood out with the Forstner bit first. Although it is quite enjoyable to hand chisel wood. There's a certain level of satisfaction that you get using hand tools over power tools. After I was done chiseling the hole, I moved back over to the drill press again and drilled a hole for the wires to go through on the switch and got to installing the switch. And for the last portion, last woodworking portion of this project, I drilled the holes to mount the motor. I clamped a piece of scrap wood on the back side of the vise to prevent tear out, and then got to installing the motor. This is a 12-volt battery pack. It takes 8 AA batteries. 8 AA batteries at 1.5 volts apiece ends up being 12 volts. The last portion of this project, I moved over to my ridiculously dirty electronics bench, zoomed way in so you can't see my gigantic mess, and started wiring this up. This is the point in the projects that I hope that I have done everything correctly with the electronics, because electronics run on what's called magic smoke, and if the magic smoke comes out of your electronics, they no longer work. So here I am soldering these two wires together using the NASA approved method for tying the wires together and then soldering them. Hooking up the multimeter and running the switch backwards, you can see that there is negative 12.75 volts, and forwards there's 12.75 volts. So if you reverse the polarity of the motor, you'll reverse the direction. And the 12.75 volts is more than the 12 volts that I said, but due to the nature of batteries, that's just how they work. They're actually a little bit over 1.5 volts. Once I was done with that, I soldered the rest of the wires, making sure that I had the heat shrink on first. I like using heat shrink over electrical tape because electrical tape seems to be kind of nasty, gets everywhere, doesn't look as nice. And this is the portion of the project that cross my fingers and hope this works correctly. Oh, and it does. Thank goodness. This project was very difficult to build. It's very difficult to get all these holes aligned correctly. You can see some patch jobs throughout here and spots that I didn't get aligned correctly, but hey, it's assembled, it works. The 30 RPM gear reduction motor provides adequate clamping torque. Basically, I have no limiter on the motor, it just runs until it stalls, so it will provide full torque until it reaches its stall point. The 30 RPM was a little bit slow. I had originally ordered a 100 RPM motor, but happy accident. Really glad that I got the 30 RPM motor because the lower RPM motors will actually provide more torque in comparison to the higher RPM motor. That means that I can get more clamping pressure out of this. And to demonstrate how this will work, here is the clamp actually clamping, doing what it does. And you can see here, it works really well. And I pull it out, but it required quite a bit of force. I think in terms of providing clamping force for rotational force, it will work perfectly. It will work plenty fine for what I plan on using it for. Well, I thank you guys for watching. If you've made it to this point in the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have an honest brother's day.